Wisdom of the Middle Way. Nagarjuna's Mulamadhyamakakarika translation and commentary by J. L. Garfield, Part 2, the text and commentary. Chapter 15, Examination of Essence. This chapter continues the discussion begun in Chapter 13 and carried on in Chapter 14 of the fundamental nature of things and the relation between emptiness and existence. Here Nagarjuna rejects the coherence of the concept of essence and explores its ramifications for the concept of inherent existence, the concept of an entity, and the concept of a nonentity. This chapter is also aimed at dispelling any nihilistic interpretation of the Madhyamika philosophical orientation and in explaining the deep connection between the analysis of phenomena as empty of essence and the demonstration of the possibility of empirical reality.
1. Essence arising from causes and conditions makes no sense. If essence came from causes and conditions, then it would be fabricated. Essence by definition is eternal and independent. So it can't arise dependently. Chapter 15, 1, 2 develop this point directly. But since all entities arise dependently, it follows that none of them have essence.
2. How could it be appropriate for fabricated essence to come to be? Essence itself is not artificial and does not depend on another. In these first two verses, Nagarjuna indicates the three cardinal characteristics of an essence, or an entity that exists in virtue of possessing an essence, is uncaused, independent of other phenomena, and not fabricated from other things. It is important to bear this in mind in any Madhyamika analysis of emptiness. For when Nagarjuna argues that phenomena are all empty, it is of essence in this sense that they are empty. Hence, when Nagarjuna argues that all phenomena originate in dependence upon conditions, that all phenomena are interdependent, and that all phenomena are fabricated, both in virtue of being compounded from parts and in virtue of acquiring their identity as particulars through conceptual imputation, he is thereby arguing quite directly for their emptiness.
3. If there is no essence, how can there be difference in entities? The essence of difference in entities is what is called the entity of difference. This is an echo of the argument about difference presented in Chapter 1. Essential difference presupposes essences of individuals. So any argument against individual essence will count as an argument against essential difference.
4. Without having essence or otherness essence, how can there be entities? If there are essences and entities are established. The concept of an inherently existent entity is the concept of an entity with an essence. So without essence, there are no inherently existing entities.
5. If the entity is not established, a nonentity is not established. An entity that has become different is a nonentity, people say. By a nonentity, Nagarjuna means something inherently different from some existing entity. A non-table in this sense would be inherently different from a table. But a non-existent in general would be a Mainongian subsistent, which is available as a basis of predication, but is intrinsically different from what it is to be an existent, a real thing possessed of the property of being non-existent. Just as a table must be established as a determinate entity in order to establish the nature of non-tables, existence must be established as an inherently existent property in order to establish the parallel status of non-existence. But neither tables nor existence can be so established. By the same token, then, there are no inherently established non-tables, nor any inherently established non-existence in their stead. So even though it might appear that an analysis through emptiness would leave us only with non-tables and non-existent phenomena, it doesn't even leave us with that, inherently, though it leaves us with plenty of tables, non-tables, existence, and non-existence, conventionally.
6. Those who see essence and essential difference and entities and nonentities, they do not see the truth taught by the Buddha. If the only way that one can think about phenomena is to think of them as things with inherent natures and to think of things without such natures as thereby non-existent, none of the Buddhist doctrines of impermanence, emptiness, or liberation will make any sense.
7. The victorious one, through knowledge of reality and unreality, in the discourse to Katyayana, refuted both it is and it is not. In the discourse to Katyayana, the Buddha argues that to assert that things exist inherently is to fall into the extreme of reification, to argue that things do not exist at all is to fall into the extreme of nihilism, and to follow the middle way is neither to assert in an unqualified way that things exist nor in an unqualified way that things do not exist. It represents one of the fundamental suttas of the Pali Canon for Mahayana philosophy. In the sutta, the Buddha claims that reification derives from the failure to note impermanence and leads to grasping, craving, and the attendant suffering. Nihilism, he claims, is motivated by the failure to note the empirical reality of arising phenomena. It leads to suffering from failure to take life, others, and morality seriously enough. The middle path of conventional existence leads to engagement in the world without attachment.
8. If existence were through essence, then there would be no non-existence. A change in essence could never be tenable. If for a thing to exist were for it to be a determinate entity with an essence, then no thing would ever cease to exist or change in any way. For an essential property is a necessary property, and it is incoherent to say that a thing loses a necessary property.
9. If there is no essence, what could become other? If there is essence, what could become other? In the first half of this verse, the opponent replies that since the argument in the previous verse presupposes the reality of change, it must presuppose the reality of the changer. If it presupposes the reality of change, it presupposes the reality of things that change and, hence, that persist through time. In order to remain the same, there must be some essence that accounts for this identity. Nagarjuna replies, however, that if this persistence through time were determined by essence, the change it putatively explains would be impossible. Only conventional existence over time can explain change. Nagarjuna summarizes, paraphrasing the discourse to Katyayana.
10. To say, it is to grasp for permanence. To say, it is not, is to adopt the view of nihilism. Therefore a wise person does not say, exists, or, does not exist.
11. Whatever exists through its essence cannot be non-existent is eternalism. It existed before but doesn't now entails the error of nihilism. To say that if something exists, it does so in virtue of having an essence and hence cannot change or pass out of existence would entail the absurd position that everything is eternal. To say of something that it existed in this strong sense with an essence in the past, but does not do so now, is absurd. For if for something to exist is for it to do so inherently, and if it is not now existent, it could never have been. So since everything we observe is impermanent, if the only existence that there could be were inherent existence, nothing could exist at all. That would be nihilism. The upshot of this chapter is that the very concept of an essence, and hence the very concept of an inherently existent entity at all, is incoherent. No coherent conception of the phenomenal world can be one in which things are posited other than conventionally.